November the 17th. Weather prevented any observation today. Nor was I able to reach the south cliff. Since I ringed 3 adult birds last year, I would be interested to see you.
Damn sheep.
Hello, science fiction and terror walk into a bar and order a Cold War cocktail, shaken, stirred and spiked with pure paranoia. But something's already watching from the loch, and trust me, it's got a taste for fear. A twisted fusion of man and machine, built to be unstoppable, but breaking down in the worst way possible. The water hides its secrets, the night swallows its screams, and by the time you see it, dear viewer, it's already too late. Look once, look twice, then look again, because this is the Nightmare Man. Mist shrouds the cliffs of Inver, a remote Scottish isle where fear is brewing. When local dentist Michael Gaffikin stumbles upon a woman's mutilated body on the island's desolate golf course, the scene is beyond horrific. No weapon can be found, the murder committed just by sheer, brutal force. The terror spreads. A woman's severed head is found in a ransacked cottage. A sheep is torn apart, limb from limb. A twitcher's body lies broken on the moor, his camera capturing something unnatural, something impossibly fast.
Nothing human did that.
Then there's the accompanying audio tape, his final moments drowned out by a chilling, ungodly sound. As radiation spikes near a mysterious craft, the islanders brace for the worst. But Gaffikin begins to know the truth. This isn't just a manhunt. This is something more terrible than anyone would have ever imagined. In 1980, the BBC tasked producer Ron Craddock with finding a novel suitable for adaptation into a 4-part drama for the following year's schedule. After sifting through numerous possibilities, Craddock narrowed his choice down to 2 contenders. Unable to decide between them, he handed both to his secretary and asked for her opinion. She spent the weekend reading, and when she returned, her recommendation was clear: Child of Vodyanoy. Published in 1978 by Robert Hell Limited, Child of Vodyanoy was written by David Wiltshire in 1976. The novel drew inspiration from childhood memories of the Howard Hawks film The Thing from Another World, a story of isolation, fear, and the unknown. Intrigued by its potential, the BBC approached Wiltshire and secured the rights for £3,000. With the project in motion, Craddock turned to two seasoned names to bring the adaptation to life. He enlisted Douglas Camfield to direct and Robert Holmes to transform the novel into a compelling screenplay. In my opinion, and I say this with absolute conviction, Robert Holmes was one of the finest and most underrated television scriptwriters of his time. His career was as fascinating as his writing. A former World War II soldier, he was at one point the youngest commissioned officer in the British Army. After that, he worked as a journalist and a police officer before turning his hand to television, where he truly made his mark. He's best remembered, of course, for his work on Doctor Who, and rightly so. His scripts brought us some of the show's most iconic adventures, such as Spearhead from Space, The Time Warrior, The Reboss Operation, and The Caves of Androzani, to name just a few. He also created two of the series' most enduring monsters, namely the Autons and the Sontarans. And I have to confess, I'm rather partial to the Drashig. Holmes had a natural flair for dark, atmospheric storytelling, often leaning into horror-infused science fiction. His time as Doctor Who's script editor coincided with what many enthusiasts of the classic show now call the show's gothic horror era, a period filled with eerie, unsettling, and Hammer-esque crafted tales, a period of the show never, in my humblest opinion, equalled.
I bring Sutek's gift of death to all humanity.
Given his track record, you'd be hard-pressed to find a better writer to bring the Nightmare Man to life. The same can also be said of director Douglas Camfield, known for his punchy, gritty approach to storytelling. A former BBC trainee with a military background, he brought a sharp, disciplined edge to his productions, crafting stories with a strong sense of realism, tension, and pace. Camfield is another talent best remembered for his work on Doctor Who. Camfield directed some of the show's most ambitious and beloved serials, including the epic 12-parter The Daleks' Master Plan, The Web of Fear, The Invasion, and Terror of the Zygons. His episodes often featured fast-paced action, well-choreographed fight sequences, and a striking use of location filming, setting his work apart from many of his contemporaries. Camfield had a knack for creating atmosphere and suspense, often blending horror with military precision, a combination that made him the perfect choice for the Nightmare Man. Filming began on Monday, the 12th of January 1981. For the next 4 weeks, the cast and crew worked tirelessly until production wrapped up on Friday the 6th of February, just a few months later. The finished series was broadcast, running from the 1st of May to the 22nd of May in 1981.
Now, BBC One begins a new series, a 4-part dramatisation of a David Wiltshire mystery thriller, The Nightmare Man. Part 2 of this story of The Nightmare Man can be seen at the same time next Friday evening.
While the story was set on the fictional Isle of Inver, the real locations used for filming were quite different. Rather than heading to Scotland, the production team found the perfect backdrop in North Cornwall, basing themselves in Port Isaac. Many key scenes were shot right there in the village, while others were filmed further afield. Padstow to the south and Tintagel to the north. In Tintagel, the local youth hostel was cleverly transformed into the island's Coast Guard station, seamlessly blending into the eerie, isolated atmosphere of the story. When it came to adapting the novel for television, Robert Holmes stayed remarkably true to the source material. A few names were altered, but these were simply translations rather than major changes. Overall, very little was lost in the transition from page to screen, ensuring that the chilling essence of the novel remained intact for television audiences. David Wiltshire was never invited to adapt his own novel for TV, and it's fair to say he was content with the bulk of the story bar the ending. The changes made to the story's conclusion didn't really sit well with him, and while adaptations often take creative liberties, this was one revision he would rather have done without. Wiltshire said that,
"The only real objection I had was the televised version finished on the golf course. I had set it at night in a forest, with a one-on-one situation, which I thought was a lot spookier. I don't know why they didn't do it like that. Apart from that, I was very pleased with the standard of everything in the production."
It was the BBC's decision to change the title from Child of Vodyanoy to The Nightmare Man, though interestingly, that alternative title had already been scribbled on the original manuscript by David Wiltshire himself. So what are Vodyanoy, I hear you muse, unless you are a know-all? Well, dear viewer, the Vodyanoy are Slavic in origin, and it's a water spirit described in some resources as a bloated, slimy, green-skinned thingamajig with webbed hands, glowing eyes, and a beard that's more algae than hair. It also has a habit of drowning people and dragging them into the murky depths of its domain, punishing those who pollute or disrespect the rivers and lakes. I'm sure it would have a field day with the water board that we have in England at the moment. Be none of them left. Bastards. Other accounts go full nightmare fuel, describing it as a remorseless predator lurking beneath the surface and waiting for someone foolish enough to get too close. Either way, it's not the kind of thing you'd want to meet on a skinny dip. So while the BBC wisely ditched the original title, probably to avoid baffling audiences who had never heard of Slavic bog monsters, the spirit of the Vodyanoy lingers in the Nightmare Man story. Wiltshire brings us the creeping dread, the unseen terror, the sense of something lurking just out of sight, waiting. It all ties back to the same fear of an inhuman menace just beneath the surface. When The Nightmare Man finally aired, it was met with overwhelming praise from both critics and the public. National newspapers gave it glowing reviews, and it even earned mentions on BBC Radio 2 and Points of View. Points of View is a short review programme broadcast on the BBC where viewers wrote into the station about its programming input, and where "yours truly outraged of Tunbridge Wells" became a household phrase, usually referring to a prude. Viewers writing into Points of View described it as the most terrifying television they had seen in years. This can be seen in the draw of viewers, with 7.4 million viewers for the first episode and averaging out about 6 million subsequently for its Friday night slot on BBC One. Buoyed by this success, Wiltshire later approached Ron Craddock with another of his novels, Genesis 2, a story exploring an underground society, biological engineering and cloning. Unfortunately, the BBC passed on the idea, deeming the production costs far too high. Despite its impact at the time, The Nightmare Man was never repeated. A shame really, because it remains a chilling, fast-paced and gripping drama that's well worth a look and look again. Reflecting on his own memories of writing the story, Wiltshire once said that,
"As ridiculous as it may seem, it's the only book where I was doing a few bits of writing in the bath, and I ended up getting so cold with fright that I had to get out."
Well, dear viewer, I thoroughly enjoyed this atmospheric little four-parter and felt compelled to furball it up here, partly to keep it from fading into obscurity and of course to recommend it to those who may have never seen it. It's unmistakably a product of its time, and yes, it leans towards the dialogue-heavy side in places, but let's be honest, that was an era when audiences had attention spans longer than a gnat's. What truly elevates The Nightmare Man is its setting. Those fog-shrouded, mist-drenched landscapes that create an unshakable sense of claustrophobia and isolation. You feel the island's remoteness, the creeping dread, the inescapable tension at times. There are even nods to the stalk and slash craze that dominated late 70s and early 80s pop culture, particularly in the killer's point of view shots, that signature red overlay and fisheye distortion as victims are hunted down and dispatched. And does it work? Well, absolutely. The cast, as expected from BBC dramas of the era, unlike now, is solid. James Warwick takes the lead as Michael Gaffigan, alongside Celia Imrie as Fiona Patterson, in what was an early career role for her. While Imrie is best remembered for her work with Victoria Wood, her career stretches back even further. I even spotted her in the 1974 House of Whipcord. Here, in The Nightmare Man, she's given a meatier role than in her earlier appearances, serving as quite integral to the plot, thanks to her character's cartography skills and knowledge of the area. Of course, in true 1980s fashion, the show also finds ample opportunity to showcase her ample cleavage, because, well, it was the 80s.
You haven't said anything about my dress.
Well, that's because from where I'm sitting, I can't see a great deal of it.
Do you think it's too daring?
Well, it's certainly a bit risky. The way the waiter's hands were shaking, I thought you could have had second-degree burns.
For me, though, the standout performance has to be Maurice Roves as Inspector Inskip. Unflappable, determined, and effortlessly commanding. Roves would later appear in Peter Davison's final Doctor Who serial, The Caves of Androzani, also penned by the Nightmare Man script writer Robert Holmes. Other notable appearances include Jonathan Newth and James Cosmo, a man with a career spanning 6 decades and still going strong. His barbed-wired larynx and a stature always set to intimidate have become his trademarks, and here playing the part of Sergeant Karch are on point. Despite its age, The Nightmare Man remains a gripping slice of dread-fi, a chilling, fast-paced thriller with an ever-building sense of unease. If there's one minor drawback, it's the decision to shoot on video rather than film, which at times gives the visuals a slightly flat, washed-out look, but even with that limitation, it never manages to diminish the eerie atmosphere. True to the golden rules of suspense, The Nightmare Man keeps its bloodthirsty menace mostly out of sight until the final episode, likely a creative decision, but also possibly influenced by its pre-Watershed time slot. It's unsettling enough to induce nightmares, yet never quite gruesome enough to make anyone retch. For 3 episodes, we're given only the briefest glimpses of the killer, a shadow here, a flash of movement there, just enough to stoke our curiosity without spoiling the mystery. And then episode 4 arrives, and with it, the big reveal. Let's just say, after all that careful build-up, the payoff doesn't quite live up to expectations. One gets a distinct impression that, like most BBC sci-fi of the era, the budget simply wasn't up to the task of realising its full potential. The result, a climax that falls a trifle flat. A prime example of how sometimes what the audience imagines is far scarier than anything a production team can afford to put on screen, so thank God for Camfield. However, the creature is oddly creepy and reminded me of the creation in the Out of the Unknown episode Frankenstein Mark II, but we can no longer see that creation as that little gem's been wiped from the BBC archives. But this isn't, so suffice to say, The Nightmare Man is well worth a watch, preferably in the dark, and with your favourite blend rolled and ready. Let's just say, you might just feel a chill or two. And with that, my dear viewers, I'll leave you to the chaos of life. Remember, we're all perfectly imperfect, and I wouldn't change a thing. Until next time, try not to fuck up too much, but if you do, at least make it interesting. Until next time on Look, Look, and Look Again. Cheerio.
Yeah.